I thought I was going through my dark night of the soul, so I was like keeping it quiet. It's gonna be great testimony, man. I'm gonna be like, I really held strong, and it got worse and worse. And what made it worse is I read the Bible twice all the way through in 1 year. And the first time I was like, fuck, it's not what I thought it was. And then the second time I'm like thinking, oh, this will help. And it was like, that made it way worse. And and so it was just like, and then I started reading everybody I wasn't supposed to. You know, it starts with Brian McLaren and Rob Bell, and then you're reading Ken Wilber and Tolkien Rinpoche and whatever. You know, just like I'm out now. And you know, I had 4 kids and a wife, and I was a megachurch pastor, and I had a lot of power and privilege, and I knew that, oh shit, I'm becoming an atheist, and I'm gonna lose everything, maybe even my kids and my wife and my friends so you know, some of the critique was like, oh, he's soft selling the gospel to grow his church. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I know exactly what's gonna happen when I'm open about this. I'm gonna lose everything. Like, this isn't. People who are not going to church aren't like, oh my God, you think gay people are okay? I can't wait to come to church.
Exactly.
Like, they don't give a shit.
Exactly.
So, you know, I kept it private.
Yeah.
Until I realized that, because I had gone back to, I'm just going to preach other people's sermons until I can say something true.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I don't have anything to say that's evangelical. So I just went back. It was like rehashing old shit, you know, and because I thought it was the right thing to do. I'm like, I gotta, you know, I'm going through my own crisis. I don't need to foist this on everybody else. And then I just got too much, you know. I was split on the inside, and I started saying, hey, we gotta look at this Bible, what it is. Like, God commands genocide in this thing, and that's dangerous. So we need to know that this isn't God, the words of God.
Right.
And as soon as we do that, we become capable of some incredible violence, you know.
Yeah.
Like Voltaire's line, you know, those who can get you to believe absurdities can get you to commit atrocities.
Yeah, yeah.
So I started going through the Old Testament like, this is bullshit, this isn't true, you know, there's no way that a God of love is saying, you know, kill all these people. And so people started leaving long before the LGBT thing. It was just the watershed, like the dam broke kind of moment that gets a little bit more airplay. But what the truth is, you know, people had been sniffing out what I was headed towards for a long time. Yeah, yeah.
At that point, then, like, and it's interesting to go back, because there's always, you said, like, the paper cut start, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's always something that gets in there, and then you're like, yeah, I'm on a slippery slope, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like, slippery slopes are so much fucking fun, you know? Nobody goes to Big Bear to not have a slippery slope, right? Like,
for sure. I've always said, if I write a book, you know, I'm going to at least have a chapter, My Fantastic Ride Down the Slippery Slope. I mean, and, you know, it's important to say, I'll probably include this too, that when people talk about that, I'm always like thinking, let's think about that position. Like, if everything you could do is a descent down a slippery slope, the position is precarious inherently.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you must be on this, like, just narrow line,
right,
that you can't so much as read a Brian McLaren book, or you're off the edge.
Right.
It's not a very good position. It's not strong. It's not a stable position. And that was certainly true. I mean, as soon as I started asking questions, it was just like the whole house of cards comes down, because evangelicalism is a house of cards. It's, first of all, it's a really young, immature version of Christianity that just is very American.
Right.
And you have to take it all kit and caboodle, you know? So if you take out, you know, inerrancy, the whole thing comes down. You can't pick anything out of the structure, or the whole thing comes down. And so that's a problem the Episcopals, let's say, don't have to deal with, right? So there are other versions of, you know, the world of Christianity that don't have to deal with that, but evangelicalism is, you know, kind of a powder keg when it comes to asking questions.
Absolutely. I mean, the house of cards thing, like, things come unraveled so quickly within evangelicalism. And what I think is interesting is, like, whenever people start on that road, it's like, to me, I've seen my deconstruction, or the slippery slope, as more of like, the whole time that has been the divine inviting me out of these very rigid understandings of what it means to engage the infinite.
Yeah, for sure. I no longer think I was deconstructing anything. What really was happening was my faith expanded. I didn't lose it. I thought I was losing my faith. Of course it felt like that, right? Because that's all I knew. But what was happening was my faith was just exploding beyond the demarcation lines of my own tradition.
Yeah.
And so it didn't fit into that small container anymore. And so that's not a loss, it's an expansion for sure.
You talked about like basically on the verge of atheism, right? And there's this
I full on like,
yeah.
I got cancer in 2017, and that was kind of like the final, like I watched just who really showed up in my life, and I was just like, it was just the biggest, like, oh my God, like it was my friends from high school, you know, who were like really showing up for me, you know, them and like my staff who had stuck with me.
Yeah.
So yeah, by the time I had cancer, I was just like, I don't have any reason to believe that somebody's in control, you know, any of this stuff is my theism died. And I would say today I don't feel like I'm a theist.
Yeah.
But psychedelics blew my materialism apart for sure.
Yeah.
And that's, I thought I'd land, okay, I exited Christianity. I came to peace with, hey, this is all we got. And it's okay for me, like an optimistic atheism. Like, I'm not a theist, but what a beautiful opportunity to live, you know, and we should do our best with it. And then I did high dose mushrooms and ayahuasca and LSD and 5-MeO DMT and I mean, it's just, it took me so much further into unknowing. Like, it shattered my knowing that this is all there is. Like, I don't know that anymore.
Right.
I know very little.
Yeah.
So
I want to talk a little bit about that transition into you know, the next chapter of your life, if you will. So like what I think is peculiar about that is it seems to be at least some level of recurring theme, at least in my life, where it's like you go down this slippery slope, people think that you're like selling out to like get people to pay attention to you, and like it's like you don't understand, man. I was at a fire with a couple people who are still involved at church, and they were talking about another church in the area, like, oh yeah, like they're starting to preach universalism now to like grow their church. And I'm like, time out, dog. Nobody preaches universalism to grow their church.
No way.
You preach hell to grow your church.
Yeah.
You preach the Bible is the only authority to grow your church.
For sure.
People want certainty, clarity, a definitive leader that's courageous in things that are, quote, countercultural, which is like a very cultural Christianity. Which
that's
funny,
what cults
you know?
do. They spin the narrative so that it's always true. For instance, when we were growing early on as a church, is because we're you know, God's blessing until they hear I'm teaching something they don't agree with. Now we're growing. We're still growing, but it's because we sold out. It's like you can't have it both ways, right? And if they're growing, it's because they're God's word. But if they shrink, it's because they're preaching God's word and people don't want to hear it.
Right.
You know, you can't just keep shifting the goalposts here, you know?
Exactly. And that's what happened. It's like whenever it gets to a point then that you, at least, not you, me, I guess, in the third person, you begin to lose hope on all of it. And it's like, not only does my community not really support me anymore and they think that I've kind of went off the deep end, I think I believe them that I've kind of been off the deep end. But then there, at least for me, like there became a point of like just a loss of all complete hope and a loss of any sort of, you know, coherent structure to the universe at all. It's like, this is just some weird phenomenon and I'm fucked. And this is, you know, I've been sold some weird funky lie to manipulate me. And it's like this like real like dark night of the soul of like a death of everything that you've known to be true. And but it's, go ahead.
Well, I just want to point out that it's the structure that's failing us at that point.